Very flat. I took my parents to the British Museum
and walked around for a while. So I saw various things, and we got to I think the third floor at the back of the museum where the Egyptian mummies are. There's a room that has a mummy in it, and in a vitrine that's very low to the ground, and a fiberglass version of the pit that it was found in. And it's surrounded by all these old pots, and it has four glass walls and a mirrored ceiling, and it's called the Gabellian Man. And it was found in Egypt in it was in Egypt, and it was desiccated in the sands of Egypt for like 6,000 years. It's completely dry, unembalmed, naked, and crunched into this fetal position. And its skin is mottled, brown and yellow, stretched over its bones, and made hard through dryness. You can see his hands are made from. His hands are made from the stuff the body's made from, but they're a different texture and colour. They're like the colour of dog chews. I can see behind his fingers his teeth, and nearly an expression on his face if it weren't for his hands covering his face. But this wasn't what my mum was looking at. My mum was looking at the virtual autopsy display of the Gabellian Man, about 5 feet away from the actual body. There was a touch screen that protrudes at the wall at an angle, and a larger screen on which is a 3D rendering of the Gabellian Man made from thousands of CT scans. There's two scientists in white coats, and they've got clear latex gloves, and they're both holding this mummy that's in the same position as the Gabellian Man, but its hands are a bit more away from its face, and they're very carefully putting it into a grey plastic tray. It's about to be fed into a CT scanner. And when it's being fed into the supervillains from Superman are trapped in a mirror. It spins through space for eternity, and it's called a phantom zone is where they are. It's a prison, a kind of an abstract prison, and they're up against the wall as the tray moves into the CT scanner, and these two magnets spin around the body very, very, very high speeds, and spinning in space seemingly forever. And they're up against the surface of this diamond-shaped piece of glass that's spinning in space. Villains, and they can't get out. It's as if they're in this eternally big room and there's only one window, and this is the only way to get out, and they're just banging on it forever. Shriveled blue brain inside a cross-section of a computer rendering of a mummy's head, and there's this green stick that's gone through it. Supposedly it's a piece of metal that was left in the head when the guy was trying to take the brain out of the nose. And when the mummy's in the CT scanner, it's being chopped into thousands of image slices, and then a 3D computer rendering will take those image slices and stack them back together like a slice pan being turned back into a loaf. And this can be spun around in black space and cut into, and its layers stripped away to reveal different parts of it. And at the virtual autopsy display are these three boys. And their 6 hands are on the touch screen, clambering for control of the body. And their hands, blue latex covered glove hand of an blue latex covered glove hand of a cop picks up a knife from a pile of knives on a trestle table. There are seized knives, meat cleavers, samurai swords, daggers, axes, And there's a photographer from Metro AM there with him, and they met the guy from Metro AM, asked the cop if he could brandish a knife and point the tip of the knife toward the camera lens. And to imagine he's threatening to stab the person, the commuter the next morning who's reading the newspaper and seeing the image. And he wants to do that, but he doesn't, because he knows he's not allowed to. So sometimes when he's alone with the knives, he plays with them. And sometimes he picks up samurai swords, and he likes the noise they make when you chop them through the air. But he doesn't do that this time. He does what he's supposed to do, and he takes the knife and he holds it carefully between his thumb and his forefinger on the butt. He presses the tip into the top of his baby finger. And he looks into the camera with an expression of paternal concern, but also gratitude that this thing's been taken out of circulation. It's been taken out of the realm of use and put into the realm of the sacred. The blue latex-covered glove hand of the archaeologist holds the hand of the O'Crowan man bog body in a way that makes it look like the blue latex-covered glove hand of the archaeologist knows that the O'Crowan man isn't holding its hand back. It's showing us the shape of the hand that it's made after being in the bog for 2,000 years. Is probably the victim of a very violent sacrificial death called a threefold death, where 3 mortal wounds are inflicted on his body to appease 3 separate gods. 2,000 years in falling to the bottom of the bog, hit the bottom of the bog. Bottom didn't stay the bottom for long as the seasons changed and the climate changed. More water came into the bog, and the bog became a bog pool, and then it dried out and it became mud, and he was being churned in this dark space somewhere on the spectrum of ground for 2,000 years. And the acidic nature of the water leached his bones of minerals and made them like rubber and tanned the skin a deep red brown. For 2,000 years, thousands of tons of water and bog pressed down on his body, pushing it toward its own image, pushing it back toward its own image, as if he was an image before he was a body. And their hands are fumbling with the digital rendering of the corpse of the Gabellian man. They're stripping away its flesh and adding it again, and cutting into it in various cross sections and jerking it around the screen. And it's inconsistent. What's happening to the body is inconsistent and without reason, because their hands want to know what they can do to the body, and it's playing out on the flat screen beside the touch screen. And the youngest kid is maybe 5 years old. When I was five, my mum made me a turtle costume. It's made of a green tracksuit with a yellow patch on the front. And I had a official plastic Raphael mask that I got at the Hallmark shop in Bray. And the best part was a green shell made from green felt, stuffed with cushion stuffing. And it had 2 straps for make it like a backpack to hold onto my back. David Attenborough sits on a rock. And he's wearing beige chinos and a blue linen shirt and a Panama hat and sensible shoes with a good sole. And he's got a very special appointment with the oldest living member of the Galapagos Islands. And Lonesome George comes plodding over in this kind of slow geriatric gait, and he is old, but he looks like he's always been old. Like his skin was taken off his body as a child, laid out, stretched, and dried out in the sun before being hung on his already ancient and dry bones. His shell is equally dry and arid, but it's shiny in parts, and the parts where it's shiny look like parts of statues that have been rubbed for centuries. He was 200 he was 102 when he died. They shipped his body to the Natural History Museum in New York to be taxidermied. The taxidermist didn't know how to taxidermy a tortoise that big, so he just treated it like a normal sized tortoise. And what you have to do is, with the shell, it's because it's this honeycomb structure of bone filled with grease to make it waterproof but also breathable, is dunk the shell in a degreasing solution and then take it out, let it dry and varnish it. They dunked Lonesome George's shell in a degreasing solution, but it leached grease for 3 months. The youngest kid, who's maybe 5 years old, has a drumstick lollipop in his right hand, and he puts it in his mouth, and he puts both his hands on the screen, and then he takes it out of his mouth with his left hand, and he puts it in his mouth, and he has both hands on the screen, has it in his right hand, and he's got this sticky syrup, pink and beige sugar lollipop syrup all over his fingers, and he's rubbing the surface of the screen with his sticky fingers. And you can see the friction between the tips of his fingertips and the previously clean glass and the greasy tackiness that is leaving behind. You can nearly hear his skin coming off the surface every time he lifts a finger. And then he looks at his own mom. He looks at his own mom, and his hands are still on the screen. His hands are still moving whilst he's looking at his mom, and his hands are moving in the way that they were moving. And they're trying to keep the space that they had made for themselves that were beside his brother's hands, because his brothers were trying to touch it as well, but he was trying to keep the space open by his hands moving, but they were moving of their own volition, completely unconscious of what they were doing to the body, stripping its layers and adding its layers, zooming in. And I take a picture of my mum looking at the virtual autopsy display on the touchscreen. The 3 kids, and she when Padre Pio died, he was made a saint in the Catholic. He was a saint, maybe he was made a saint before he died, but the Catholic Church decided that his body was incorruptible, that it wouldn't rot, and that it would stay in the condition that it was in the moment that he passed over. And they buried him, and then they dug him up maybe 30, 40 years later in 2008, and they found that he didn't have a face anymore. So they got a team of people in Italy who make waxworks to make a perfect silicon facsimile of his face with real human hair and an expression of eternal repose. And they put that face onto his skull where his face was supposed to be. And they put him on display. When I was a teenager, I saw a bog body for the first time at the National History Museum on Kildare Street, and the body was the Barronstown man. He's a long, man-sized bog body that looks like bits of old leather and dried out, like bits of oil bran stuck to the side of a bowl, all kind of laid out, and it has a clump of perfectly red hair where its head is. And it was on display amongst all of the other artefacts then. Nowadays the bog bodies are in a very special part of the museum, which have very deliberate kind of secularized tomb, museumified architectural structures surrounding them. Then they were just open on display and presented as something like anything else that was taken out of the bog and was important because of how old it was. And I took out my camera and I tried to take a photo of it. And a guard approached and he said, you're not to be taking a photo of that body. And I said, why? And he said, well, it's just a mark of respect for the dead. And I said, okay, sorry. And he saw that I had a sketch pad under my arm. He said, you can draw a picture of it if you want. So I took out my sketch pad and started to draw a picture, and I was drawing a picture. I thought, what? This body's 2,000 years old. He doesn't know what a camera is. Whose respect is the camera not being? If I can draw it and I can't take a photo of it, why can I? As a teenager, I saw Aliens for the first time, and in Aliens there's this robot called Bishop. Bishop is an android, and he's a very particular type of android called a synthetic, and synthetics are almost exactly like humans, but they have just synthetic material instead of like biological or organic materials. Like they got carbon fiber chassis instead of skeleton, and they've got vat-grown silicon colloids instead of muscles. They have white liquid latex circulation fluid instead of blood. And at the end of Aliens, they've escaped this planet in the spaceship called the Sulaco, and Bishop and Ripley are on the spaceship, and they're like really relieved that they've just got out of this planet because they just want to go home. And all of a sudden, this huge black tail just goes through Bishop's back and out of his chest, like, and he lifts him off the ground, and all this white liquid latex fluid is going like, and he's going. And the alien has these two claws that come out of her stomach, and she just goes like that, and she goes, and he just like slices Bishop in two, and his legs fall on the ground. They go like, and then she just throws the rest of his body onto the ground, and it hits the deck of the Sulaco like a big bin bag full of mayonnaise, like, and he's going, and he kind of dies. And then Ripley gets into an escape pod, and she gets into the escape pod, and she's like, well, oh, okay, I've got into the escape pod, and she has like Bishop's remains, and she got there and there as well, and she sets the controls for Earth, and she gets into the cryogenic stasis, and she goes to sleep, and she's like, in 17 years I'll wake up, on Earth will be fine. And at the end, and the movie then, and then at the end of, then at the start of Aliens 3, the spaceship has a fire on it, and you can see it also has an alien on it, and then the computer overrides the navigation system and lands it on the nearest planet, which happens to be this prison planet. And the spaceship crashes, and Ripley is asleep still because it's cryogenic stasis, and she's saved by these guys that live on the planet. And she wakes up and she's like, why, was there an alien on board? I think there's probably an alien on board. And she was like, where's the robot? Where's Bishop that was in the spaceship with me? And they're like, oh, he was wrecked, so we just threw him in the rubbish. And she's like, where's the rubbish? She's like, well, there's a dump around the back of the building. She goes around the back of the building, finds Bishop, pulls him out of the rubbish dump, and gets a car battery, sparks it up, and goes like, tss, 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 tss. And then Bishop wakes up and he goes,
Ripley, I like your new haircut. What would I know? I'm just a glorified toaster.
And Ripley's like, well, Bishop, what happened to this boat? Why aren't we at Earth now? Why did this crash here? She suspects there's an alien on board, but she just asks him, and he's like, his mouth starts moving, out of his mouth comes this female voice of the onboard computer. And it says, fire in cryogenic compartment. Fire in cryogenic compartment. And Ripley's like, okay, there's a fire, but Bishop, listen, was there an alien on board? And he says, yes. And she's like, okay, shit, well, I suspected that, but listen, you're in pretty bad shape, but I think we can fix you. And then Bishop's like,
I could be rebuilt, but I'll never be top of the line again. I'd rather be nothing.
I take a picture of my mom. And the picture, she looks really worried and concerned. And I ask her, why do you look so worried? worrying you? Look, in this picture, she said, well, is this a virtual autopsy displaying those kids playing with the body? It seemed really disrespectful. The kids didn't know what they were doing, but it was the virtual autopsy display, it just made everything so explicit. And I said, the body is right beside, it's like 5 foot away, the actual body. The referent of the sign is beside the thing. What's the issue? Why is the image